you learn from that. And so the literature talks about how the support of mentoring is really critical for everyone to understand and learn how to speak up. Because when you're new to the operating room, when you're like a baby OR nurse, a lot of times you're thinking, like I did, this is how I would think as a baby OR nurse, Bovie suction fluids, Bovie suction fluids. Like you're not thinking about, I have to speak up, right? We do have a checklist now. We have a timeout in the operating room. And oh, interesting fun fact, checklists to some degree originated in World War II with the pilots flying this big bomber called a B-17. It was just one of the most complicated things to fly at that time. And so they developed checklists so that they can make sure before they took off, they had everything in place to make sure, hey, we're good to go. So that's the origin of the one of the origins of the timeout and the checklist. But the mentoring part is just as important so that we can help people who are new or uncomfortable speak up. And I encourage all mentors to do that, to educate your staff.
And you bring up a really good point. It doesn't have to be just another nurse that you've been assigned to. There's preceptors, there's mentors, there's champions in the OR, there's residency programs, and those all have very valid places and help retain nurses. But it brings to mind when you're talking about surgeons and how they can really make a difference. And I know you've told me a story that I would ask that you share because you had a unique situation where your previous work helped with a situation as a new nurse somewhere else. And I think it really highlights our point that it's safety is a team sport. Okay, everybody should be involved in this. So Marianne, let's tell our listeners and viewers that story because I think it really shows how we can all work together.
Right, and this was a matter of safety in the operating room. I worked at a facility in northern New Jersey, but I had transferred to a facility out west, out in the Midwest. And I worked in neurosurgery. That was my primary specialty, and worked with a neurosurgeon that would absolutely not give information prior to the case, and in particular would not give information regarding what kind of brain surgery it was. It was either an aneurysm or a tumor, typically, and he would not explain what we were doing, wouldn't tell the OR for scheduling purposes. It was just not addressed. And so he would come in to put up the films on the view box and lean back and say, wow, this is a really interesting tumor. And then everyone would run around and scramble to get the instrumentation together because it was a little different between the two. So things weren't prepared. And when you think about that, if the team isn't prepared and is scrambling, that could be a patient safety issue if we don't have what's needed or it's incorrect. That really bothered me. So what I did, I started putting the films up on the view box, and I could tell by the two different the different types of imaging and things what we were doing. And the surgeon came in one day and the staff was upset that I was doing that. And the surgeon predictably was upset I was doing that also and asked why I did that. And I said, because I don't like running around when I'm trying to be as prepared for your case and your patient as possible. And my reward for speaking up was
Yeah,
not
how'd that go over?
my reward for that speaking up was to be quizzed on the structures of the brain in that particular before that case started. Mercifully, I got it all right. And the reason I got it right is because the facility I came from, the neurosurgeon stressed making sure everyone was prepared for the situation at hand and even emergent situations. And they did that by having a collaborative discussion with the team. Prior to us even seeing the patient, we would have that conversation. And they also would bring us over to the view box and explain what we were doing and the approach into the brain and why. And it was very astute of them and very, very good for them to get the team prepared. So you weren't guessing and you were ready to go when that patient came in the room and you were ready to start your count. So I always applauded them for that collaboration, which clearly saved me from a disaster when I was being quizzed in the
For
operating room.
sure.
And I might mention, the management was not supportive in that situation. He of course went to management and complained, and management spoke to me about it, and they were not supportive. They were supportive of the surgeon and the way he liked to do it. And I felt defeated. I felt defeated with him. I did not feel defeated to continue to speak up in the operating room, but management is a huge component of supporting by supporting the speaking up.
Well, and one of the, and thank you for sharing that because it does take a lot to stand up and try to do, you, I mean, you tried to do numerous things in that one scenario. One, elicit change for the betterment of the patient. And we know that anytime people are confronted with a change, that's a problem. There's also the issue of a personality. You know, here's a guy who his whole joy, if you will, in doing the craniectomies or whatever he was doing. He liked to play a game. That was his shtick. That's the way he wanted to do things. You know, he's probably pulling in a decent revenue volume when he has OR time, and you know, people just don't they don't want to deal with that. But that doesn't mean that it should not be looked at from. I do think really where um, all the studies have shown that if you have a leader that looks at it, you know, and it doesn't mean that to your point, they don't have to confront the doctor, but they do have to say, you know, as nursing, this is how we need to set up for your case. This, you know, with the patient, like you said, it involves the patient safety. So his little fun game, and they allowed it to continue, that doesn't mean that that was the right way to do things, and we all know that, you know, even though it's something's being done doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. But I really applaud the leadership I've seen just across the country. I used to travel nationwide for work, and I would have the ability to go into IDNs as well as ambulatory and sometimes even physicians' offices, and I can see the work that is really fabulous that nurse residencies, Periop 101, and we'll do a whole episode on this because I feel so strongly about this. Not your example is one, and I have plenty of my own. I've had great, you know, surgeons that every case they want to talk about what they're doing, and at some point you're like, oh, but it makes a difference though, and it helps you learn, and it helps you be a better